Welcome, everyone. I am absolutely thrilled you're joining me for this explainer. Every single day, trillions of dollars circle the globe at literal lightning speed. And today, we're going to look at the invisible plumbing that actually makes all of that possible, the financial system. We're going to pull back the curtain on this global network and see it for what it truly is, the ultimate high-stakes matchmaker that connects our daily lives and literally makes human progress possible. All right, let's dive right in. To really wrap our heads around this, I want you to think about your own biggest life goals for a second. Maybe it's sending your kids to college, starting up your own business, or, finally retiring to a house on a sunny beach. All of these dreams require very practical, real-world steps to fund them, or to protect the financial progress you've already made. But how do those dreams actually materialize? How do we bridge that massive gap between wanting something and actually having the resources to get it? Take buying a house, for example. Most of us definitely lack the upfront cash to just buy a home outright, right? So the structural solution isn't just a simple loan, it's an intertemporal resource transfer, which is a fancy way of saying a mortgage. It basically allows you to consume today against the earnings you're going to make in the future.
Or think about a physical asset, like buying a shiny new car. You obviously can't personally eliminate the chance of it getting stolen or dinged in a parking lot, but you can hedge against the financial ruin of that happening. An insurance contract lets you pool and transfer that risk to a company designed to absorb it so you can actually sleep soundly at night.
And hey, what about the money you do manage to save up? If you just hold on to excess cash, inflation is inevitably going to eat away at your purchasing power. True wealth generation means you have to put those funds to work, allocating your capital into equities or fixed income markets so you can actually capture a yield.
And right here is where our core conflict begins. Let me introduce you to Mary. She's an innovator, she's rich in brilliant ideas, but she is totally starved for capital. And over here is James. He's sitting on a pile of surplus liquidity and is desperately looking for a yield so he can secure his retirement. In finance terms, Mary is what we call a deficit unit, and James is a surplus unit.
So Mary's specific goal is to manufacture a state-of-the-art household cleaning robot. It's a fantastic idea, but manufacturing takes serious capital. She needs a factory, parts, a whole team of employees. Meanwhile, James is just sitting on his retirement funds, needing an investment opportunity exactly like this one. So here is the massive narrative tension of our modern economy. How in the world can Mary and James possibly find each other? If they could just connect, both of their needs would be perfectly met. But how does that actually happen?
Well, that matchmaking is the exact purpose of the financial system. It's not just a bunch of boring banks. It's this incredibly dynamic ecosystem of institutions, markets, instruments, and regulations that enable the transfer of resources from surplus units, like our saver James, over to deficit units, like our innovator Mary. The really crucial point here is that the financial system is an active, living mechanism for allocating capital, transforming risk, and keeping the real economy functioning. It is literally the invisible bridge between James and Mary.
Now, this whole ecosystem relies on four main pillars to stay standing: financial instruments, financial markets, financial intermediaries, and supervisory authorities, which is basically just regulation. Let's break these down real quick.
At their core, financial instruments are simply legal contracts between parties that clearly define their duties and their rights. And they exist to fulfill four very specific human needs. We've got payment, think of your credit cards. We have investment, like shares of stock for James. We have financing, like the corporate bonds Mary needs to issue. And we have risk management, like derivatives. Every single piece of paper or digital code in the entire system serves one of these four fundamental purposes.
When it comes to actually moving the cash around, there are basically two main highways: direct finance and indirect finance. In direct finance, Mary might issue her bonds or stocks straight to James in the open financial markets. But in indirect finance, Mary gets her funding through a middleman, like a bank, which is exactly where James happens to have deposited his cash. That intermediary steps in to source both the loanable funds and the loan opportunities. Okay, take a breath. I know, this float chart looks like a giant, highly complex puzzle at first glance, but please don't let it intimidate you. It is simply a map showing cash flowing from the suppliers of funds on one side all the way over to the firms on the other. You can see the cash either moving straight through the middle via direct markets, like equity and corporate bond markets, or taking the scenic route around the top and bottom through intermediaries, like banks, pension funds, and insurance companies. It's just a map of money finding its way to where it's needed most.
But looking at all that crazy complexity, you might naturally be asking yourself, wait a minute, If Mary has this amazing idea for a robot, and James has the cash he wants to invest, why do we even need all these complex intermediaries and equity markets and banks? Why can't they just meet up, shake hands, sign a piece of paper, and do the deal themselves? It's a fantastic question.
The reality is, a simple direct handshake is nearly impossible because real-world markets are, frankly, pretty messy. They are plagued by prohibitively high transaction costs and steep information asymmetry. These roadblocks are the very reason financial institutions even exist in the first place.
First off, let's talk about the massive burden of transaction costs. Imagine James trying to actually find Mary. How much time and money would he burn just searching for a viable business to invest his life savings in? That's a search and information cost. Then, once he finally finds her, they need a legally binding contract. Who pays the lawyers to draft that? And since lawyers seemingly charge by the millisecond, those contracting costs alone could literally bankrupt Mary's project before it even begins. Doing this individually is just way too expensive and time-consuming.
But an even bigger issue is asymmetric information, which just means one party knows a whole lot more than the other. And this creates two very distinct headaches. Adverse selection is the before problem. The market fails because the people most eager to borrow money are often the absolute highest risk. And James doesn't have the expertise to realize Mary might be a terrible bet. Then you have moral hazard, which is the after problem. Once Mary actually has James's cash, what stops her from taking wild, unapproved risks with it? James is left completely vulnerable.
And this is exactly where financial intermediaries swoop in to save the day. Institutions like banks stepped right into the middle of this chaos. Because they do this all day, every single day, they exploit economies of scale. They specialize, drastically reducing those information costs. They standardize the contracts. And most importantly, they act as the ultimate filter. They screen out the bad risks to prevent adverse selection, and they closely monitor the borrowers over time to prevent moral hazard. They bridge the gap so perfectly that James gets a safe return on his retirement, and Mary gets the loan to go build her robot business.
So the next time you swipe your debit card, take out an auto loan, or just check your retirement app, I want you to remember this explainer. You aren't just moving numbers around on a screen. You are actively participating in this fascinating, invisible engine of the global economy. Your savings might literally be out there right now, funding the next great technological breakthrough. So I'll leave you with this provocative thought. As your money sits in the bank today, who is it matchmaking with right now? What incredible human dream are you unknowingly helping to build? Thank you so much for joining me to demystify the financial system, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.